After getting out of prison, the first thing I did was bring flowers to my husband's grave. As I leaned down to lay them, I noticed the caretaker's little girl hiding nearby. I called her over and gave her some candy. Then she whispered, "Ma'am, there's nobody buried there." Want me to tell you a secret? From what she told me, I froze in horror. The coffin was empty when they buried it. My daddy saw it himself. He said, "Your husband isn't dead at all." The world around me seemed to stop. An empty coffin? Vernon not dead? The flowers slipped from my trembling hands as my knees buckled. 5 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit, for him. And now this revelation from a child's innocent lips. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "Lily," she said, twirling a strand of her copper hair. "Lily Calloway. My daddy takes care of all the graves here." "Why would your daddy say that about my husband's coffin?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "'Cause he saw it," Lily said matter-of-factly. "When they were putting the box in the ground, it fell and cracked open. Daddy says it had sandbags in it. He told the funeral people, but they paid him money to keep quiet. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Vernon had faked his death. And if Vernon was alive, then my conviction for his attempted murder was based on a lie. A lie I had paid for with 5 years of my life. "Lily, what are you doing?" A man's voice called from across the cemetery. The caretaker, Lily's father, was striding toward us with a rake in hand. "I have to go," Lily whispered, her eyes suddenly wide with fear. "Daddy doesn't like me talking to people about the graves." She darted away, leaving me alone with my shattered reality. I scrambled to my feet as the caretaker approached. He was a tall man, with weathered skin and suspicious eyes. "Sorry if my daughter was bothering you, ma'am," he said, his gaze taking in my appearance. The too loose clothes, the institutional haircut that was growing out awkwardly, the hardness around my eyes that prison gives you. "Not at all," I replied, studying his face. She was just keeping me company while I visited my husband, Vernon Hargrove. I watched his reaction carefully. The slight widening of his eyes, the quick glance at the headstone, the nervous adjustment of his grip on the rake, all told me that Lily had been telling the truth. "Right. Well, sorry for your loss," he mumbled, already turning away. "Come on, Lily. Time to go home." "Mr. Calloway," I called after him, "I'd like to speak with you about the day of my husband's funeral." He froze, then slowly turned back. "I don't know what my daughter told you, but she has an active imagination. Active enough to imagine sandbags in a coffin?" His face paled. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I've got a family to support." "So did I said quietly, "before I went to prison for killing a man who apparently isn't dead." He glanced around nervously. "I can't talk here. Meet me at Donovan's Diner on Main Street tomorrow at 7 a.m. before my shift." Then he hurried away, pulling Lily along behind him. I stood by Vernon's empty grave until the cemetery grew dark, trying to process the revelation. My husband had framed me for his attempted murder, let me go to prison, and then faked his death. But why? What could possibly be worth destroying our life together? Our marriage hadn't been perfect, but it hadn't been broken either, at least not that I knew of. Vernon was a financial advisor with his own firm, respected in the community. I'd been a high school art teacher before my conviction. We had a beautiful home, financial security, and plans to start a family. What had changed? As I walked back to the halfway house where I was staying until I could get back on my feet, I tried to remember the last normal day before everything fell apart. It was hard to separate the memories from the testimony at my trial, to distinguish what had actually happened from what the prosecution claimed had happened. The halfway house was a converted Victorian in a rundown part of town. I shared a room with 2 other women, Darlene, who was on parole after serving time for check fraud, and Tamara, who had been convicted of drug possession. They were both out for the evening, which gave me rare privacy to think. I sat on my narrow bed and pulled out the few possessions I'd managed to keep from my previous life. My wedding ring, which I no longer wore, a photo of Vernon and me on our wedding day, and a small notebook where I'd written down all the inconsistencies I'd noticed during my trial. There had been so many things that hadn't made sense, evidence that seemed planted, witnesses whose stories changed, financial records that appeared and disappeared. I'd told my court-appointed attorney about my concerns, but he'd dismissed them. The jury won't care about these discrepancies, Marlowe. They've got your fingerprints on the weapon. They've got your argument with Vernon that the neighbors overheard. They've got your lack of an alibi for the time of the attack. Focus on showing remorse, not on conspiracy theories. But I couldn't show remorse for something I hadn't done. I'd maintained my innocence throughout the trial, which the prosecutor had painted as cold-heartedness. The jury had convicted me of attempted murder, and the judge had sentenced me to 12 years. I'd served 5 before being released early for good behavior. During those 5 years, I'd received news that Vernon had died from complications related to the injuries from my attack. I'd been denied permission to attend the funeral, of course. Prisoners convicted of attempting to murder their spouses don't get compassionate release to attend those spouses' funerals. Now I knew that funeral had been a sham. Vernon was alive somewhere, living a new life while I'd been locked away, my reputation destroyed, my career ruined, my future stolen. I pulled out the notebook and began to write. Tomorrow, I would meet with Lily's father and learn what he knew. But that would just be the beginning. I was going to find Vernon Hargrove, and I was going to make him pay for what he'd done to me. Sleep was impossible that night. By the time dawn broke, I had compiled a list of everyone I needed to talk to. Vernon's business partner Ellis Montague, his sister Vivienne, our neighbors, and the detective who had led the investigation against me. But first, Lily's father. I arrived at Donovan's diner at 6:45, ordered coffee, and waited. At 7:05, I began to worry. At 7:30, I knew he wasn't coming. Either he'd lost his nerve, or someone had gotten to him first. I paid for my coffee and walked the 15 blocks to Harrington Cemetery. The gates were open, but there was no sign of Calloway or Lily. I approached the small groundskeeper's cottage near the back of the property. The door was ajar. "Mr. Calloway?" I called, pushing the door open wider. "It's Marlowe Hargrove. We were supposed to meet for coffee." No answer. I stepped inside, instantly alert to the wrongness of the scene. The cottage had been ransacked, furniture overturned, papers scattered, drawers pulled out and emptied onto the floor. "Mr. Calloway?" I called again, moving carefully through the chaos. I checked each room, finding more destruction but no people. In what appeared to be Lily's bedroom, a backpack was missing from its hook, and the closet door hung open, showing empty hangers. They had left in a hurry. On Lily's small desk, partially hidden under a toppled lamp, was a drawing of a grave with a coffin exposed. Inside the coffin were crude brown rectangles, the sandbags. In a child's handwriting, along the bottom, "Daddy says we can't tell." I carefully folded the drawing and put it in my pocket. On the back of Lily's bedroom door was a calendar. Yesterday's date had been circled in red marker, with "Lady at Daddy's work" written in the space. Today's date had "Moving Day" written in the same marker, surrounded by stars. They'd been planning to leave. Was it because of what Lily had told me, or was there another reason? I left the cottage and walked to the cemetery office, a small brick building near the front gates. The door was locked, and a sign indicated it was closed on Sundays. Through the window, I could see a desk with a computer and filing cabinets along the back wall. I needed access to those files. I needed to know who had paid for Vernon's funeral, who had made the arrangements, who had signed the paperwork. But breaking into the office in broad daylight wasn't an option, especially with my record. One parole violation, and I'd be back in prison. I needed allies. The problem was, after 5 years away, I didn't know who I could trust. My parents had died in a car accident when I was in college. I had no siblings. Most of my friends had distanced themselves during the trial, uncomfortable with the notoriety or unwilling to believe in my innocence. There was one person who might help, though he wasn't exactly a friend. Desmond Fletcher had been Vernon's college roommate and the best man at our wedding. He'd been one of the few people who had publicly expressed doubt about my guilt. He'd even visited me in prison a few times during the first year, though the visits had eventually stopped. The last I'd heard, he was still in town, working as an insurance investigator. I found a payphone and looked up his number in the directory. He answered on the third ring. Desmond Fletcher speaking. Desmond, it's Marlowe. Marlowe Hargrove. A pause. Marlowe? I heard you were out, but I didn't expect... Are you okay? Not really. I need to talk to you. It's important. Another pause. I'm not sure that's a good idea, Marlowe. Things are complicated. Vernon's alive, I said bluntly. The silence that followed lasted so long, I thought he might have hung up. Where are you? He finally asked, his voice tight. Near Harrington Cemetery. There's a coffee shop on the corner of Maple and 4th. Go there and wait. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't talk to anyone else. The line went dead. I replaced the receiver, wondering if I'd made a mistake, but Desmond had reacted to my statement about Vernon, not with shock or disbelief, but with caution. He knew something. The coffee shop was quiet, just a few Sunday morning regulars reading newspapers or typing on laptops. I chose a table in the back corner, facing the door, and ordered another coffee. Exactly 18 minutes later, Desmond walked in. He'd aged in the 5 years since I'd last seen him. His dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples, and there were new lines around his eyes and mouth. He spotted me immediately and walked over, his expression guarded. Marlowe, he said, sliding into the seat across from me, you look like I spent 5 years in prison. I finished for him when he trailed off. A slight smile. Actually, I was going to say determined. Gut. I am determined. Vernon is alive, Desmond. I have proof. He leaned forward. What kind of proof? I told him about Lily and what she'd said, about the empty cottage and the drawing I'd found. A child's story and a crayon drawing aren't proof, Marlowe, he said when I'd finished. You need something more substantial if you're going to make accusations like this. I'm not making accusations. I'm stating facts. Vernon framed me, and then he faked his death. I just don't know why. Desmond sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Look, I always believed you were innocent. The Marlowe I knew could never have done what they claimed. But this theory about Vernon still being alive, it's far-fetched. Then help me prove it one way or the other, I challenged him. You're an investigator. Investigate. He studied me for a long moment. What exactly do you want me to do? I need to see the paperwork from Vernon's funeral. Who arranged it? Who paid for it? Who identified the body? Those records should be at the cemetery office, but it's closed today. You want me to break in? He asked incredulously. I want you to use your professional connections to get access legally, I corrected him. But if that doesn't work, then yes, I want those records one way or another. Desmond shook his head. You've changed, Marlowe. 5 years in prison will do that to a person. I leaned forward. Will you help me or not? He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I'll see what I can find out. But Marlowe, you need to be careful. If Vernon did frame you, if he is alive somewhere, then he's dangerous, and he has powerful friends. I know. I pulled out the small notebook from my pocket. I've been keeping track of the inconsistencies, the things that never added up. Desmond took the notebook and flipped through it, his expression growing increasingly troubled. You've done a lot of thinking about this. I had 5 years with nothing to do but think. He handed the notebook back. I have a friend at the county clerk's office who owes me a favor. I'll see what I can find out about the death certificate and funeral arrangements. In the meantime, where are you staying? The Waverly House on Pine Street. He frowned. The halfway house? That's not safe. Not if you're poking around in this. My options are limited right now. I have a guest room, he offered, then quickly added, no strings attached. Just a safe place while you figure things out. I considered his offer. I barely knew Desmond, despite the fact that he'd been Vernon's best friend and our best man. Vernon had always kept his college friends separate from our married life, claiming they reminded him of a wilder time he'd rather forget. But I needed allies, and Desmond seemed genuinely willing to help. And the halfway house, with its revolving door of residence and minimal security, wasn't ideal for someone potentially being targeted. Thank you, I said finally. I'll need to get my things and check out properly so I don't violate my parole. I'll drive you, he offered, standing up. My car's outside. As we left the coffee shop, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its engine running. The windows were tinted, making it impossible to see who was inside. But I had the distinct feeling we were being watched. Desmond noticed it too. Let's take the back way, he murmured, guiding me down a side street to where his car was parked. As we drove to the halfway house, I asked the question that had been bothering me since our conversation began. Why did you stop visiting me in prison, Desmond? He kept his eyes on the road. Vernon's sister Vivienne told me you didn't want visitors anymore, that you'd asked to have me removed from your approved list. That's not true. I never did that. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. I should have checked directly with the prison. I'm sorry, Marlo. It's not your fault. It's just one more manipulation to add to the list. I looked out the window at the passing streets, at the normal lives continuing all around us. Why would Vivian lie about that? She and I were never close, but we weren't enemies. People do strange things when money is involved, Desmond said cryptically. What money? He glanced at me, surprised. Vernon's life insurance. It was substantial. $2 million. Vivienne was the beneficiary. This was news to me. That doesn't make sense. I should have been the beneficiary. The policy was changed about 3 months before the incident. Vernon told me it was temporary, just until he sorted out some investment issues. He said you knew about it. Another lie. I'd known nothing about a change in the life insurance policy. So Vivian got $2 million when Vernon died. That's motive right there. She could have helped him fake his death. It's possible, Desmond conceded, but remember, everyone believed Vernon had been attacked and nearly killed. The attempted murder charge against you wasn't manufactured out of thin air. Something happened that night. Yes, something had happened, though not what the prosecution had claimed. Vernon and I had argued. That much was true. He'd been secretive about his business dealings, staying out late, taking calls in private. I'd confronted him about my suspicions that he was having an affair. He'd denied it vehemently, claiming he was working on a sensitive investment deal that required discretion. He'd stormed out of the house. I'd gone to bed, assuming he would sleep in his office as he had during previous arguments. Instead, according to the prosecution, I had followed him to his office, attacked him with a letter opener, and left him for dead. A security camera had captured me entering the building, though, curiously, there was no footage of me leaving. Vernon had been found the next morning by the cleaning staff, unconscious and bleeding from multiple stab wounds. My fingerprints were on the letter opener, which wasn't surprising since it was from our home. But I had no memory of going to his office that night, no memory of any attack. I'd been drugged, I claimed at the trial. The prosecution said I was lying. Marlo? Desmond's voice pulled me from my thoughts. We're here. We had arrived at the halfway house. Wait here, I told him. I won't be long. Inside, I found the house supervisor, explained that I had found alternative housing, and completed the necessary paperwork for my change of address. I gathered my few belongings, said goodbye to Darlene, who was the only other resident around, and left. Desmond's house was in a quiet neighborhood of well-maintained older homes. It was smaller than the house Vernon and I had owned, but charming, with a red front door and windows flanked by black shutters. "It's not much," he said, as he showed me to the guest room, "but it's secure. New locks, alarm system, and the neighbors watch out for each other." "It's perfect," I assured him. "Thank you, Desmond. Get settled in. I'm going to make some calls about those records. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen." Left alone, I unpacked my meager belongings and took stock of my situation. I had a safe place to stay, a potential ally in Desmond, and a lead to follow with the cemetery records. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I took Lily's drawing from my pocket and studied it again. Children's drawings often contain details that adults might miss or dismiss. The coffin in Lily's drawing was positioned at an angle, suggesting it had indeed fallen as she'd described. There were stick figures standing around, presumably the funeral attendees. One figure stood apart from the others, drawn larger, with what looked like a star or badge on its chest. A police officer? Had law enforcement been present at Vernon's funeral? That wasn't standard procedure, but if someone had suspected the death was faked, if there had been an official investigation, I needed to find out who had been at that funeral. I needed names, connections, anything that might lead me to Vernon. Desmond returned a few hours later with a folder of documents. "My friend came through," he said, spreading the papers on the kitchen table. "Here's the death certificate, the funeral home contract, and the burial permit." I scanned the documents quickly. The death certificate listed the cause of death as complications arising from traumatic injuries. It was signed by Dr. Eliza Thorne, the same doctor who had treated Vernon after the alleged attack. The funeral arrangements had been made by Vivian Hargrove, Vernon's sister. And most interesting of all, the body had been identified by Ellis Montague, Vernon's business partner. "Not by Vivian?" I questioned, pointing to that detail. "Apparently she was too distraught," Desmond said, though his tone suggested skepticism. "Ellis stepped in to handle the identification and many of the arrangements according to these records. Ellis and Vernon had been partners for 10 years? If anyone would help Vernon fake his death, it would be Ellis." I tapped the funeral home contract. Cremation was requested, but there was still a coffin for the burial ceremony. "It's not unusual," Desmond pointed out. "Many people have a traditional burial service even with cremation. The coffin is just for the ceremony, then the body is taken for cremation afterward. But, according to Lily, there was no body in the coffin at all, just sandbags, and her father saw it when the coffin fell." I looked up at Desmond. "We need to talk to Mr. Calloway." "He's gone, Marlowe." "You said yourself the cottage was packed up and they were planning to move. People leave trails. Bank records, job applications, school transfers for Lily. You're an investigator. Can you find them?" Desmond hesitated. "I can try. But Marlowe, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that you won't like what you find. If Vernon is alive, if he did fake his death, he had help. People you trusted betrayed you." "I'm counting on it," I said grimly. "It narrows down my list of suspects." Over the next few days, Desmond and I established a routine. He would go to work at his regular job during the day, and in the evenings, we would compare notes on what we'd discovered. I spent my days at the local library, using their computers to research everything I could about Vernon, Ellis, Vivian, and everyone else connected to the case. I discovered that Ellis had expanded the investment firm significantly since Vernon's death, opening new offices in 3 additional cities. Vivian had moved from her modest home to a lakefront property valued at over $1 million. Dr. Thorne, who had signed Vernon's death certificate, had abruptly retired and moved to Arizona shortly after the funeral. The pieces were starting to fit together, but I still didn't have definitive proof that Vernon was alive or where he might be. On the 5th day, Desmond came home with news. "I found Calloway," he announced as soon as he walked in the door. "He's working at a cemetery in Glenwood, about 200 miles north of here. He started the job 3 days ago." "Did you talk to him?" "Not yet. I thought we should go together. I can take tomorrow off and we can drive up there." I hesitated. "I'm not sure I should leave town." "My parole conditions." I checked. "You're allowed to travel within the state as long as you notify your parole officer. Just call and tell them you're going to visit a friend for the weekend." It felt too easy, but Desmond was right. When I called my parole officer, she simply reminded me to be back for my scheduled check-in on Monday. The system that had been so restrictive while I was in prison suddenly seemed remarkably hands-off now that I was out. We left early the next morning, before dawn. Desmond's car was a nondescript sedan, practical rather than flashy. As we drove out of town, I watched the familiar landmarks fall away, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and exhilaration. I was taking active steps to clear my name, to find the truth after years of helpless waiting. "Tell me about Vernon," Desmond said as we settled into the long drive. "The Vernon you knew, not the one who was presented at the trial." I considered the question. "He was complicated, ambitious, brilliant with finances, charming when he wanted to be. He could walk into a room of strangers and leave with a dozen new clients. But there was always a part of him that seemed separate, like he was playing a role even with me." "Did you ever feel like he was hiding something?" "Toward the end, yes. He became secretive, protective of his phone and computer. I thought it was an affair, but now I wonder if it was this, planning to frame me, fake his death, disappear with millions." "The Vernon I knew in college was always scheming," Desmond admitted. "Usually harmless stuff. How to get into exclusive parties, how to charm the teaching assistant into giving him extension on papers. But there were times when his schemes crossed lines. He once fabricated an entire research project to win a grant, then used the money to fund a spring break trip." This was a side of Vernon I'd never seen, or perhaps had chosen not to see. "Why did you remain friends with him if you knew he was dishonest?" Desmond was quiet for a moment. "He could be incredibly loyal when it suited him. During our senior year, my father lost his job and couldn't pay my tuition. Vernon paid it, the full semester. Never asked for the money back, never held it over me. That kind of generosity buys a lot of forgiveness for other transgressions." I wondered if Vernon's generosity had been calculated, an investment in Desmond's loyalty that he could call upon when needed. Had Vernon expected Desmond to believe in his story, to testify against me at the trial? If so, that scheme had backfired. Desmond had been one of the few people to publicly doubt my guilt. We arrived in Glenwood shortly after noon. It was a small town nestled against the mountains, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. The cemetery was on the outskirts, a peaceful expanse of rolling green lawns and ancient trees. We found Calloway easily enough. He was digging a grave in the newer section of the cemetery, his back to us as we approached. He straightened when he heard our footsteps, then froze when he saw me. "Mr. Calloway," I said, stopping a few feet away. "Remember me?" He glanced around nervously, as if looking for an escape route. "You shouldn't be here, Mrs. Hargrove. I need to know the truth about my husband's funeral." "About what you saw?" He drove the shovel into the dirt and wiped his hands on his pants. "I don't know what you're talking about. Your daughter Lily told me the coffin was empty, that you saw it when it fell." Calloway's face paled. "Lily has an active imagination." "Active enough to draw this?" I pulled out the folded drawing I'd taken from the cottage. He stared at it, then at me. "Where did you get that?" "From your cottage after you disappeared." "Right after. I told you I wanted to talk about Vernon's funeral. Desmond stepped forward. Mr. Calloway, we're not here to cause trouble for you. We just want the truth. Calloway looked between us, conflict clear on his face. You don't understand the risk. These people, they're dangerous. What people? I pressed. Who paid you to keep quiet? He hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. Not here. There's a diner in town, Maggie's on Elm Street. I get off at 5. Meet me there at 5:30. We'll be there, I promised. As we walked back to the car, Desmond murmured, He's scared. Really scared. Wouldn't you be if you'd seen what he saw? If you knew what he knows? That's my point, Marlowe. Whatever he knows has him terrified. These dangerous people he mentioned, what if they're watching him even now? What if they followed you to his new job? The thought hadn't occurred to me, but Desmond was right. If Vernon and his accomplices had gone to the trouble of faking his death and framing me, they wouldn't hesitate to silence a groundskeeper who had seen too much. Maybe we should stay with him, I suggested, looking back toward where Calloway had resumed his digging. Make sure he's safe until our meeting. And make ourselves obvious targets in the process? No, our best bet is to be casual. Let's get lunch in town, do some shopping, act like tourists, then meet him as planned. The hours crawled by. We ate at a local cafe, browsed the shops on Main Street, even visited the small town museum. All the while, I was acutely aware of the time, counting down the minutes until we could meet with Calloway and finally get some answers. At 5:25, we pulled into the parking lot of Maggie's Diner. It was a typical small-town establishment. Vinyl booths, laminated menus, the smell of coffee and grilled onions in the air. Let's sit where we can see the door, I suggested, choosing a booth in the back corner. 5:30 came and went with no sign of Calloway. By 6, I was growing anxious. Something's wrong, I said, checking my watch again. He should be here by now. Maybe he got held up at work, Desmond suggested, but I could tell he was concerned too. At 6:15, the bell over the door jingled, and a young girl with copper hair walked in. Lily Calloway looked around the diner, spotted us, and walked directly to our table. Lily, I said, surprised to see her, where's your father? He can't come, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He sent me instead. He said to give you this. She slipped a folded piece of paper across the table. And he said, to tell you that you were right. The coffin was empty. Before I could ask her anything else, she turned and ran out of the diner. Desmond started to stand, as if to follow her, but I placed a hand on his arm. Wait, let's see what this says first. I unfolded the paper. Inside was a hastily scrawled note. Mrs. Hargrove, I can't meet you. They've found me. Not safe. Check the Oceanic Bank in Westbrook. Safe deposit box number 723. The key is taped under the third bench from the north entrance at Harrington Cemetery. I kept evidence. Good luck. I handed the note to Desmond, who read it quickly, his expression grim. We need to leave. Now. But what about Calloway? If they found him, if whoever is behind this found Calloway, there's nothing we can do for him now. And they might be looking for us, too. We need to get that key and get to Westbrook. The drive back to our town was tense. Neither of us spoke much, both lost in our own thoughts. I couldn't help but feel responsible for whatever had happened to Calloway. I had been the one to approach him, to stir up questions about Vernon's funeral. If he'd been harmed because of my quest for answers. We reached Harrington Cemetery just after midnight. The gates were locked, but the fence was low enough to climb over easily. Armed with flashlights, we made our way to the north entrance, counting benches until we found the third one. I ran my hand under the bench seat, feeling along the edge until my fingers touched something. A small key was taped exactly where Calloway had said it would be. I peeled it off carefully and held it up to the flashlight beam. Oceanic Bank, Westbrook, I murmured. That's about an hour from here, right? Yes, but it's closed now. We'll have to wait until morning. Desmond glanced around nervously. Let's not stay here any longer than necessary. We spent the night at Desmond's house, taking turns keeping watch. I dozed fitfully on the couch while Desmond sat by the window, then we switched. Neither of us really slept. At 9 the next morning, we were waiting outside Oceanic Bank in Westbrook when it opened. I approached the manager, explained that I needed access to a safe deposit box, and presented the key. "Your name, please?" the manager asked. "Marlowe Hargrove?" He checked his computer. "I'll need to see some identification, Mrs. Hargrove." I handed over my driver's license, which I'd finally gotten replaced after my release. He studied it, compared it to whatever was on his screen, and nodded. "Everything seems to be in order. Please follow me." Desmond waited in the lobby while I followed the manager to the safe deposit room. He unlocked one side of box number 723 with the bank's master key, then allowed me to use my key for the other lock. When both locks were open, he pulled out the box and placed it on a small table in a private booth. "Take as much time as you need," he said, leaving me alone with the box. I lifted the lid slowly, not knowing what to expect. Inside was a sealed envelope and a small digital voice recorder. I opened the envelope first. It contained several photographs taken from a distance with what appeared to be a telephoto lens. They showed a funeral in progress, Vernon's funeral. I recognized Vivian, Ellis, and several other attendees. But the most damning photos were of the coffin. One showed it falling, the lid cracking open. Another, blurry but distinct enough, showed the contents, what appeared to be sandbags wrapped in fabric. The last photo made my breath catch. It showed a man standing at the edge of the cemetery, partially hidden behind a tree. The image was grainy and taken from a distance, but the face was unmistakably Vernon's, my supposedly dead husband, watching his own funeral. I picked up the voice recorder with trembling hands and pressed play. Calloway's voice, nervous and rushed, filled the small booth. "My name is Gregory Calloway, and I'm recording this as insurance. On May 15th, 2020, I witnessed something at Harrington Cemetery that I wasn't supposed to see. During the burial of Vernon Hargrove, the pallbearers slipped and dropped the coffin. The impact caused the lid to crack open, revealing that it contained sandbags, not a body. Ellis Montague saw that I had witnessed this. After the service, he approached me, offered me $20,000 to forget what I'd seen and to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I needed the money for Lily's medical treatments, so I agreed. What I didn't tell him was that I'd taken photos. I also didn't tell him that I saw Vernon Hargrove himself watching the funeral from the edge of the property. I recognized him from the obituary photo. I'm making this recording because I fear for my safety. Yesterday, I received a phone call warning me to stay silent or else. The caller knew things about Lily, her school, her routine. It was a threat. If anything happens to me or my daughter, this evidence proves that Vernon Hargrove faked his death and that Ellis Montague was complicit. The recording ended. I sat there, stunned, holding the physical proof of what I'd suspected. Vernon was alive. He had faked his death. And he had powerful accomplices who were willing to threaten a child to keep their secret. I gathered the photos and the recorder, returned the empty box to its place, and left the private booth. The bank manager was waiting outside. "Did you find everything you needed, Mrs. Hargrove?" "Yes, thank you." Desmond was still in the lobby, pacing anxiously. His face lit up with relief when he saw me. "You were in there a long time." I was getting worried. "I found proof," I whispered as we walked outside. Calloway took photos of the coffin when it fell. He also saw Vernon watching his own funeral. Photos? Actual photos? Desmond stopped walking, staring at me in disbelief. "Let me see." I started to reach into my bag, then hesitated. We were standing in front of the bank, in plain view of anyone passing by. After Calloway's warning, after everything that had happened, I couldn't be too careful. "Not here," I said quietly. "Let's go somewhere private." We found a small park a few blocks away, relatively empty on a weekday morning. Sitting on a bench partially secluded by trees, I showed Desmond the photos and played the voice recording for him. "This is it," he said when I'd finished. "This is the proof you need. We should take this to the police." "Which police?" I asked skeptically. "The same department that arrested me based on manufactured evidence? The detective who ignored all the inconsistencies in the case against me? How do we know they weren't involved in the frame-up?" Desmond frowned. "You can't think the entire police department was in on this? I don't know who was involved or how deep this goes. All I know is that Vernon is alive. He framed me for his attempted murder, and now an innocent man and his daughter are in danger because they had evidence of his deception." "So what's your plan? Find Vernon yourself?" "Yes," I said firmly, "and I think I know where to start looking. In the photo of Vernon at the funeral, he's wearing a distinctive watch, a Rolex with a custom blue face. He bought it to celebrate a major investment deal about a year before the incident. It's unique, custom made, and luxury watches like that require specialized service. If Vernon is still wearing it, he'll need to have it serviced eventually. There are only a few authorized Rolex dealers in this part of the country." Desmond nodded slowly, understanding my logic. "We check with the dealers, see if anyone matching Vernon's description has brought in that specific watch?" "Exactly. And I know he wouldn't go to the dealer here in town. Too risky. But the next closest authorized service center is in Westbrook, where we are right now. We found the Rolex dealer easily enough. A high-end jewelry store in the upscale part of town." I let Desmond take the lead, using his credentials as an insurance investigator to inquire about a specific watch for a case he was working on. He described Vernon's watch in detail, including the custom blue face and unique engraving on the back. The jeweler, a middle-aged woman with impeccable taste, checked her records. "Yes, we've serviced that watch twice in the past 3 years. The most recent service was just last month." Desmond maintained his professional demeanor, though I could see the excitement in his eyes. "Do you happen to have the customer's contact information?" "For our insurance records." "I'm not supposed to share that information without a court order," she said hesitantly. "Of course, I understand. Perhaps you could just confirm if the owner's name is Vernon Hargrove?" She checked her screen again. "No, that's not the name we have on file. The watch belongs to a Mr. Vincent Holloway. Vincent Holloway, Vernon Hargrove. The initials were the same, VH Classic Vernon, to choose an alias he could easily remember." "And the address?" Desmond pressed. "I really can't. It's a matter of some urgency," he interrupted smoothly. "Mr. Holloway may be the victim of identity theft. We're trying to protect him from further fraud." She hesitated, then relented. "Well, I suppose, in that case, he lives at the Lakeside Condominiums, Unit 512. "Thank you," Desmond said sincerely. "You've been extremely helpful." Outside, I could barely contain my excitement. He's here in Westbrook, just a few miles away. "Marlo, we need to be careful about this. If Vernon is Vincent Holloway now, if he's built a new life here, he'll do whatever it takes to protect that life." "I know, but I need to confront him. I need to hear him admit what he did to me." Desmond sighed, recognizing the determination in my voice. "At least, let me go with you." "But not today. We need to prepare, gather more information about his routine, his security. We can't just knock on his door." He was right, of course. Rushing in without a plan could be disastrous. Vernon or Vincent had powerful allies and had already demonstrated his willingness to destroy lives to protect himself. "Tomorrow," I conceded. "We'll watch the building today, learn what we can, and confront him tomorrow." The Lakeside Condominiums were exactly what the name suggested. Luxury units overlooking a picturesque lake. We parked in a public lot across the street where we had a clear view of the building's main entrance. For hours, we waited and watched, noting who came and went, looking for a familiar face. It was nearly 5 in the afternoon when a silver Mercedes pulled into the private parking garage. The driver was obscured by the tinted windows, but something about the way the car moved, the confident precision of its parking, sent a chill of recognition through me. "That's him," I said, even though I couldn't see the driver clearly. "I know it's him." "You can't possibly tell from here," Desmond argued. "We need to be certain." We continued our surveillance until nightfall, but the driver of the Mercedes didn't emerge. Other residents came and went, but there was no sign of Vernon. "We should go," Desmond said finally. "It's getting late, and we're starting to look suspicious sitting here for so long." Reluctantly, I agreed. We drove back to town, stopping for a quick dinner at a roadside diner before returning to Desmond's house. The day had been both exhilarating and exhausting, finding the evidence, locating Vernon's new identity, coming so close to confronting him after all these years. That night, I dreamed of Vernon. Not the Vernon who had betrayed me, but the man I had married, charming, attentive, full of plans for our future together. In the dream, he was trying to tell me something important, something urgent, but I couldn't hear his words. I woke before dawn, the dream still vivid in my mind. There was something I was missing, some piece of the puzzle I hadn't quite grasped yet. Why had Vernon gone to such elaborate lengths to frame me and fake his death? Money was the obvious answer. The life insurance payout to Vivian, the freedom to start a new life without the encumbrance of a wife. But was that really all there was to it? I slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen where I'd left the materials from the safe deposit box. I spread the photos on the table and studied them again, looking for anything I might have missed. In the photo of Vernon watching his own funeral, he wasn't alone. There was someone with him, partially obscured by foliage. I hadn't noticed this detail yesterday. I peered closer, trying to make out the figure. It appeared to be a woman, blonde, her face turned away from the camera. Who was she? A new lover? Someone Vernon had betrayed me for? Or an accomplice in his scheme? I was still studying the photos when Desmond joined me in the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You're up early," he observed, moving to start the coffee. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the shadowy figure beside Vernon in the photo. He wasn't alone at the funeral. Desmond leaned in to examine the image. "It's not clear enough to identify who's with him." "No, but it confirms he had help beyond just Ellis and Vivian. Someone else knew he was alive, someone who was with him the day of his funeral. That complicates things," Desmond admitted. "We don't know how many people are involved in this deception, or how far they'll go to protect it." All the more reason to confront Vernon directly today. Desmond looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just nodded. "Let's go back to Westbrook." "But Marlowe, promise me you won't do anything rash." "Define rash," I said with a grim smile. We arrived at the lakeside condominiums just before 9 in the morning. The silver Mercedes was still in its parking spot, visible from the street entrance to the garage. "He's home," I said, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. Now, we just need to figure out how to get into the building. The condominiums had good security, a doorman, keycard access, surveillance cameras, but they also had a weakness. Residents who were willing to hold the door open for someone who looked like they belonged. We waited until we saw a woman approaching the building with several shopping bags. Desmond stepped forward quickly, offering to help her with the door. She smiled gratefully as he held it open, allowing both of us to enter behind her. "Thank you so much," she gushed. "These bags are killing my arms." "No problem at all," Desmond replied smoothly. "Have a great day." Once inside, we headed for the elevators. Unit 512 would be on the 5th floor. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Desmond could hear it as we rode up in silence. The hallway was plushly carpeted, the walls painted a soft beige with tasteful artwork at intervals. Unit 512 was at the end of the corridor, with a view of the lake, judging by its position. We stopped outside the door. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing pulse. "Are you sure about this?" Desmond asked one last time. "I've been waiting 5 years to confront the man who stole my life." "Yes, I'm sure." I knocked firmly on the door. Silence. I knocked again, louder this time. From inside, a voice called, "Just a minute!" The voice was familiar, yet different, deeper, with a slight accent that hadn't been there before. But it was unmistakably Vernon. The door opened, and there he stood, the husband I'd been convicted of trying to kill, the man whose funeral I'd been denied permission to attend. He looked different. He'd lost weight, dyed his hair a darker shade of brown, and grown a neatly trimmed beard. But his eyes were the same, and they widened in shock when he saw me. "Hello, Vernon," I said calmly, though inside I was anything but calm. "Or should I call you Vincent now?" He tried to slam the door, but Desmond was faster, blocking it with his foot. "That's not very neighborly, Vernon," Desmond said, pushing the door open wider. Vernon stumbled backward, his face pale with shock. "How did you find me?" "You're supposed to be in prison." "I was released," I said, stepping into the luxurious apartment. "Good behavior." "Unlike you, I actually served my time for a crime I didn't commit." He glanced between us, calculating his options. I could see the moment he decided that denial was his best defense. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice steadier now. "My name is Vincent Holloway. I think you have me confused with someone else." "Save it, Vernon," I snapped. "We have proof. Photos of the empty coffin at your funeral, photos of you watching from the trees, a sworn statement from Gregory Calloway about what he witnessed. Your little scheme is over." At the mention of Calloway's name, Vernon's expression changed. A flicker of something, fear, guilt, crossed his face before he regained his composure. "What do you want?" he asked, dropping the pretense of denial. "The truth," I said simply. "Why did you do it? Why did you frame me? Fake your death? Destroy my life?" Vernon sighed and moved to an elegant leather couch, gesturing for us to sit. I remained standing, unwilling to accept his hospitality after everything he'd done. "It wasn't personal, Marlowe," he said, as if that made it better. "It was about survival." "Survival?" "You were a successful financial advisor with a beautiful home and a wife who loved you. What were you surviving exactly?" "The firm was in trouble," he admitted. "Ellis and I had made some questionable investments. We were using client funds to cover losses, moving money around to hide the shortfalls. It was supposed to be temporary, just until our other investments paid off." "So you committed fraud," Desmond interjected. "That doesn't explain framing Marlowe for attempted murder or faking your death." Vernon ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. The Securities and Exchange Commission was closing in. They were asking questions, requesting records. We knew it was just a matter of time before they discovered the discrepancies. We needed a distraction, something big enough to buy us time to cover our tracks. "So you decided to be the victim of a violent crime," I said, disgust evident in my voice. "And I was the convenient perpetrator." "You were never supposed to be convicted," Vernon protested. "The evidence was circumstantial at best. Any decent attorney could have created reasonable doubt. But you insisted on maintaining your innocence instead of pleading to a lesser charge." "Because I was innocent," I exploded, "and you let me go to prison anyway." Vernon at least had the grace to look ashamed. By then, it was too late. The plan had taken on a life of its own. Ellis saw an opportunity to solve all our problems at once. Fake my death, let the insurance payout cover some of the missing client funds, and create a new identity for me far away from the investigation. "With Vivian's help," I added, "the pieces falling into place. She got the insurance money, passed it along to Ellis, and kept your secret." "Yes," Vernon admitted. "She never liked you much anyway. said you weren't good enough for me. The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. And the woman who was with you at the funeral? The blonde in the photos? Who was she? Vernon's expression froze. What woman? I pulled out the photo from my bag and placed it on the coffee table. This woman? Your partner in crime? Your new lover? Vernon stared at the photo, genuine confusion on his face. There was no woman with me that day. I came alone, watched from a distance, then left immediately. I looked at the photo again, at the blonde figure partially obscured by foliage. If it wasn't someone with Vernon, then who was it? Before I could puzzle it out, the door to the apartment opened. A woman walked in, arms full of shopping bags. She stopped short when she saw us, her face registering surprise, then recognition, then alarm. "Vernon?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. "What's going on?" I stared at her in shock. It was Dr. Eliza Thorne, the doctor who had treated Vernon after the attack, the doctor who had signed his death certificate. She looked different from the professional physician I remembered. Her hair was longer, dyed a rich auburn instead of its natural blonde, her style more casual and youthful. "You," I breathed, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "You were the blonde in the photo. You've been with him all along." Dr. Thorne, no, Eliza, dropped her shopping bags and moved quickly to Vernon's side. "They know? They have proof," Vernon replied grimly. "Photos of the empty coffin, a statement from the cemetery caretaker." Eliza's face paled. "What about the others?" "Ellis, Vivian. We haven't approached them yet," Desmond said, watching their interaction with keen interest. "We came to Vernon first." "Vincent," she corrected automatically. "His name is Vincent now." "His name," I said coldly, "is Vernon Hargrove, and he is a fraud, a liar, and a criminal who let his innocent wife go to prison for a crime that never even happened." Vernon stood up suddenly. "Look, what's done is done. I can't change the past, but I can make it right moving forward. I'll confess, clear your name. Just give me time to get my affairs in order, to explain things to Eliza." "Explain what?" I demanded. "That you're going back to prison where you belong? That your elaborate scheme is finally falling apart?" "Please," Eliza interjected, her professional demeanor asserting itself. "Let's discuss this rationally. No one needs to go to prison. We can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone. The only arrangement I'm interested in is justice," I said firmly. "Vernon framed me for attempted murder. He and his accomplices, including you, Dr. Thorne, committed insurance fraud, identity theft, and who knows how many other crimes. You're going to confess, all of you, and I'm going to clear my name." Vernon and Eliza exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Then Vernon sighed and reached for his phone. "Who are you calling?" Desmond asked suspiciously. "Ellis," Vernon replied. "If I'm going to confess, he needs to know. He deserves a chance to prepare." I wanted to object, to stop him from warning his accomplice, but part of me recognized that this was the fastest way to get the full truth. If Ellis came here, if all the conspirators were finally in one place— Vernon spoke briefly on the phone, his words measured and calm. "Ellis, it's me. Something's come up that we need to discuss immediately. Can you come to my place?" "Yes. Now, it's urgent. And call Vivian. Ask her to meet us here, too." He ended the call and turned back to us. "They'll be here within the hour. Then we can all discuss how to proceed." The next 45 minutes were among the most surreal of my life. I sat in Vincent's luxury apartment, surrounded by the evidence of his new life, while my ex-husband and his lover prepared coffee and made small talk as if we were old friends catching up. "So, Desmond," Vernon said conversationally as he set cups on the elegant coffee table, "how's the insurance business treating you?" "Better than the investment business treated you, apparently," Desmond replied dryly. Vernon laughed, a sound so familiar it made my chest ache. Touché, but seriously, you're looking well. Life's been good to you? Is this really happening? I interrupted, unable to contain myself any longer. Are you actually trying to make pleasant conversation after what you did? Vernon had the grace to look embarrassed. Force of habit, I suppose, social niceties in uncomfortable situations. There's nothing nice about this situation, I said coldly. You destroyed my life, Vernon. I lost everything. My freedom, my career, my reputation, my home. I spent 5 years in prison while you were living in luxury with your doctor girlfriend. For what it's worth, Eliza said, sitting beside Vernon, I never intended for things to go this far. When Vernon first came to me with his plan, it was just about creating medical records of an attack that never happened. I never thought you'd be convicted. Yet, when I was, you went ahead with the next phase, faking his death, signing a false death certificate, committing insurance fraud. Eliza looked down at her hands. By then, I was in too deep. If the truth came out about the attack, I'd lose my medical license, face criminal charges, and I loved him. The doorbell rang, interrupting this uncomfortable confession. Vernon stood to answer it. Ellis Montague and Vivian Hargrove stood in the hallway, both looking tense and wary. Ellis had aged in the 5 years since I'd seen him. His hair was fully gray now, his face more lined. Vivian looked much the same, though her clothes were more expensive, her jewelry more ostentatious. What's so urgent that we had to... Ellis began, then stopped short when he saw me. My God. Hello, Ellis, I said calmly. Vivian, it's been a long time. Vivian's hand flew to her throat. Vernon, what is happening? Why is she here? Please, come in, Vernon said, gesturing them inside. We need to talk. As they entered, closing the door behind them, I felt a strange sense of completion. Everyone who had participated in destroying my life was now in one room. All the conspirators, all the liars, all gathered together to face the consequences of what they'd done. We've been found out, Vernon said bluntly, once everyone was seated. Marlowe has evidence. Photos of the empty coffin, a statement from the cemetery caretaker who saw it fall during the funeral. That's impossible, Ellis snapped. We paid him off. Apparently he kept insurance of his own, Desmond interjected. Photos, a recorded statement detailing everything he saw, including Vernon watching his own funeral from the trees. This is absurd, Vivian protested, but her face had gone pale. Who would believe such nonsense over our testimony? We're respected members of the community. She's an ex-convict. An innocent ex-convict, I corrected her. Framed by her husband and his accomplices for a crime that never even happened. The evidence is compelling, Vivian. Photos don't lie. What do you want? Ellis asked, cutting to the chase. Money? Is that it? How much to make this go away? I don't want your money, I said, disgust evident in my voice. I want the truth. I want my name cleared. I want all of you to confess to what you did. That's not going to happen, Ellis said flatly. Do you have any idea what we'd lose? Our reputations, our careers, our freedom? Like I lost mine? I countered. Why should you be protected from the consequences of your actions when I wasn't? A tense silence fell over the room. These people had conspired to destroy my life, had watched me go to prison for a crime they knew I didn't commit, had built new lives on the foundation of that injustice. And now they expected me to what? Take a payoff and disappear? I've contacted my attorney, Vernon said finally. He's drawing up a statement admitting that I faked the attack and my death. It will clear your name, Marlowe? Isn't that what you want? And what about accountability? What about justice? You think a statement clears the slate? You committed multiple felonies. All of you did. The statute of limitations has expired on some of the charges, Ellis pointed out, and proving the rest would be your word against ours, even with the photos. Actually, Desmond interrupted, pulling out his phone, that's not entirely accurate. He pressed a button, and Vernon's voice filled the room. It wasn't personal, Marlowe. It was about survival. The firm was in trouble. Ellis and I had made some questionable investments. We were using client funds to cover losses, moving money around to hide the shortfalls. Ellis's face contorted with fury. You recorded us? Insurance, Desmond said calmly, stopping the playback. I've been in this business long enough to know the value of documentation. You won't get away with this, Vivian hissed. You can't just come in here and threaten us. We have connections, resources. So do I replied steadily. I have the truth. I have evidence, and I have nothing left to lose. It was Vernon who broke the impasse. She's right, he said quietly. It's over. We can fight, drag this out, make it ugly for everyone, or we can try to make amends, accept responsibility. Have you lost your mind? Ellis exploded. Accept responsibility? Go to prison? Lose everything? We've already lost everything that matters, Vernon replied, with a glance toward me that held genuine regret. Our integrity, our honor. We built our new lives on lies and the suffering of an innocent woman. How long before those foundations crumbled anyway? The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Eliza reached for his hand, her expression a mixture of love and resignation. Vivienne looked shell-shocked, as if she couldn't quite believe this was happening. And Ellis looked calculating, his eyes darting around the room as if seeking an escape route. I need some air, Ellis said abruptly, standing up. This is too much to process all at once. Sit down, Ellis, Vernon ordered, his voice suddenly hard. Running won't help. It's time to face what we've done. Ellis hesitated, then slowly sank back into his seat. What happens now? He asked, defeated. Now, I said, we all go to the police. You make full confessions. You do whatever it takes to clear my name officially. And then, Vivian asked, her voice small, and then it's in the hands of the justice system. The same system you manipulated to convict me. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Desmond called a lawyer friend who specialized in criminal defense. Vernon, true to his word, prepared a full written confession detailing the entire scheme. Ellis, seeing no way out, provided documentation of the financial fraud that had started the whole cascade of deception. Vivienne admitted to her role in the insurance fraud, and Eliza acknowledged her falsification of medical records and the death certificate. By late afternoon, we were at the police station. I watched from a distance as each of the conspirators was interviewed separately, their statements recorded, their confessions documented. Desmond stayed by my side, a solid presence in the chaos of emotions swirling through me. How do you feel? He asked quietly, as we waited in a small conference room for the detective in charge to return. I don't know, I admitted. Vindicated, I suppose, but also hollow. This won't give me back the 5 years I lost. It won't restore my career or my reputation. No, he agreed, but it gives you a fresh start, with your name cleared. The detective returned, a folder in his hands. Mrs. Hargrove, I've reviewed all the statements and evidence. I want to assure you that we're taking this very seriously. The DA's office has been notified, and they'll be moving quickly to file formal charges against all involved parties. And my conviction? I asked. Will it be overturned? Based on what we've learned today, the DA will be filing a motion to vacate your conviction immediately. It should be approved by a judge within days. Relief washed over me. In a wave so powerful, I had to grip the table to steady myself. 5 years of being labeled a criminal, 5 years of carrying the weight of a conviction for a crime I didn't commit. And soon it would be officially recognized that I had been innocent all along. What happens to them now? I asked, thinking of Vernon and the others. They'll be formally charged, arraigned, and most likely held without bail, given the severity of the offenses and the flight risk they present. Mr. Hargrove, or Holloway, as he's been calling himself, is facing multiple felony charges, including insurance fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. I nodded, taking it all in. Can I see him before they take him away? The detective looked surprised by my request. I don't recommend that, Mrs. Hargrove. After everything he's done? Please, I interrupted. There are things I need to say. Things that won't matter to your case, but matter to me. After a moment's hesitation, the detective agreed. 5 minutes in the interview room, we'll be monitoring. Vernon looked smaller somehow in the stark interview room, his elegant clothes incongruous against the institutional setting. He looked up when I entered, surprise flickering across his face. Marlowe, he said softly, I didn't expect to see you again. I sat across from him at the metal table. I needed to ask you something that's been bothering me since this all began. Ask me anything. I owe you that much. Was any of it real? Our marriage, your love for me, was any of it genuine? Or was I just a convenient prop in the life you were building? Pain crossed his features. It was real, Marlowe. At least at the beginning, I loved you. Your passion for art, your kindness, your belief in me. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what mattered. The firm became everything. And when it started to fail, I made choices that changed me, changed us. You let me go to prison, Vernon. You watched me lose everything and did nothing. I know, he said, his voice breaking. There's no justification, no explanation that could ever make that right. I told myself you'd get a lighter sentence, that with good behavior, you'd be out in a few years, that somehow it would all work out. But the truth is, I was a coward. I chose myself over you, over us, over everything I claimed to believe in. And now, he gave a bitter laugh. Now I get to experience prison firsthand. Poetic justice, I suppose. That's not what I meant, I said. I meant, how do you feel now? About what you did, about the person you became? Vernon was quiet for a long moment, considering my question. Ashamed, he finally said, deeply, profoundly ashamed. Not just because I got caught, but because I finally see the full extent of the pain I caused. The lives I damaged, yours most of all. It wasn't the answer I'd expected, but it was perhaps the one I needed to hear. Not excuses or justifications, but simple acknowledgement of the harm he'd done. I won't forgive you, I said quietly. Not now, maybe not ever. But I am going to move forward with my life. I'm going to rebuild what you took from me. And I will never again allow anyone to make me doubt my own truth. Vernon nodded, tears in his eyes. I hope you find happiness, Marlowe. I truly do. As I stood to leave, he spoke again. There's something you should know about the money. Ellis didn't just use the insurance payout to cover the firm's losses. There was more, much more. Offshore accounts, investments under shell companies, your share of our assets. It's all documented in a file on my home computer, in a folder labeled restitution. The password is the date we met, December 12th, 2012. It won't undo the damage, but it might help you rebuild. I looked at him one last time, the man I had loved, the man who had betrayed me so completely. Goodbye, Vernon. The detective was waiting outside the interview room. Everything okay? Yes, I said, feeling a weight lifting from my shoulders. Everything is finally okay. In the weeks that followed, justice moved with surprising speed. Vernon, Ellis, Vivienne, and Eliza all faced multiple charges. My conviction was vacated, my record expunged. The restitution file Vernon had mentioned proved to be a comprehensive accounting of all the stolen funds, hidden assets, and offshore accounts, totaling nearly $3 million, a significant portion of which was rightfully mine. As for Gregory Calloway and his daughter Lily, they were found safe in a small town in Canada where they had fled after receiving threats. They returned to testify against Vernon and the others, with assurances of protection from the authorities. I used part of the recovered money to buy a small house near the ocean, far from the town where I had been wrongfully convicted. I set up a foundation to help other wrongfully convicted individuals rebuild their lives after exoneration, and I resumed teaching art, though now at a community center rather than a high school. Desmond remained a constant in my life, our relationship evolving from allies in my quest for justice to something deeper, more meaningful. He understood, without me having to explain, the scars that prison had left, the hypervigilance, the distrust, the moments of unexpected panic. He was patient, never pushing, always steady. 1 year to the day after my name was cleared, I stood again at Harrington Cemetery. Not at Vernon's false grave, but at a small memorial I had commissioned for the 5 years of my life that had been stolen. It was a simple stone bench with an inscription, "Truth cannot be buried." As I sat there, reflecting on everything that had happened, I spotted a small figure watching me from behind a nearby tree. For a moment, my heart stuttered with recognition. Was it Lily Calloway, returned to the cemetery where our paths had first crossed? But as the figure stepped into view, I saw it was a different child entirely, a boy of perhaps 10 or 11, with curious eyes and a shy smile. "Are you the lady who went to prison for something she didn't do?" he asked without preamble. "My mom says you're a hero because you never gave up." I smiled at the unexpected compliment. "I'm not sure about being a hero. I just believed in the truth, even when no one else did." He nodded seriously, processing this. "That's what heroes do," he decided. Then, with the abrupt topic change only children can manage, "What's your bench say?" I patted the space beside me, inviting him to sit. "Truth cannot be buried," I read aloud. "It means that even when people try to hide the truth, it finds a way to come to light eventually." "Like with the empty coffin," the boy said, nodding knowledgeably. "Everyone pretended there was a dead person in it, but there wasn't, and the little girl told you the secret." News of the case had been widespread, though I was surprised a child so young would know the details. That's right. If Lily hadn't told me what she saw, I might never have discovered the truth. The boy stood up, suddenly restless, as children often are. "I have to go. My mom's waiting." He pointed to a woman in the distance, standing by a fresh grave with flowers in her hand. "She says we should always listen when children tell us important things, even if it seems impossible." "Your mom sounds very wise," I said, watching as he ran off toward the waiting figure. Sitting there in the peaceful cemetery, I reflected on how my journey back to freedom had begun. With a child's simple truth, spoken without calculation or agenda. "Ma'am, there's nobody buried there. Want me to tell you a secret?" Those words had set in motion the unraveling of an elaborate deception, had started me on the path to reclaiming my name, my freedom, and my future. The truth had indeed refused to stay buried, just as I had refused to accept the lies that had imprisoned me. As I stood to leave, I noticed a small wildflower growing at the base of my memorial bench, resilient, persistent, pushing through the soil toward the light. Like the truth, like me.